The private dining room at Marcello's was filled with 50 guests celebrating my mother's 60th birthday. Crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and the kind of expensive Italian food that came with microscopic portions and astronomical prices. I sat at the family table between my fiancé Jake and my older sister Vanessa. Across from us, my parents held court. My father Richard Foster, owner of Foster Premium Motors, a chain of 3 luxury car dealerships, and my mother Patricia, who'd spent the past 30 years making sure everyone knew the Foster family had money. Jake looked uncomfortable in his dress shirt and tie. He was more at home in work clothes, which was one of the things I loved about him. No pretense. No games. Just honest, hardworking real. So Lauren, my Aunt Margaret said, leaning forward with champagne-fueled curiosity. Tell us more about your fiancé. How did you two meet? At his shop, I said, smiling at Jake. My car broke down and he was the mechanic who fixed it. We started talking and here we are. How romantic, Margaret said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. And what was wrong with the car? Alternator, Jake said quietly. Easy fix. My cousin Brandon, who worked at my father's main dealership, laughed. An alternator? Man, you could have done that yourself, Lauren. That's basic stuff. I could have, I agreed. But I'm glad I didn't. Otherwise I wouldn't have met Jake. My mother had been quiet through this exchange, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at Jake and then away, like she was trying to pretend he wasn't there. The appetizers arrived. Tiny portions of carpaccio that probably cost $40 a plate. Jake looked at his plate with barely concealed confusion. He was used to real meals, not decorative food. So Jake, my father said, his tone friendly but with an edge underneath. Lauren tells us you run your own shop. Automotive repair, correct? That's right, sir. Must be steady work. People always need their cars fixed. He said it the way you'd compliment a child on a decent report card. Patronizing. Dismissive. It keeps me busy, Jake agreed. Vanessa's husband Christopher jumped in, clearly trying to be helpful. There's good money in automotive work. My buddy runs a shop in Riverside, does pretty well for himself. 40, maybe 50,000 a year. Something like that, Jake said neutrally. I squeezed his hand under the table. He told me he wanted to handle this dinner on his own terms, wanted to see how my family would treat him without the full truth. I'd agreed, though watching them be condescending to the man I loved was harder than I'd anticipated. And where did you learn the trade? My mother asked. Trade school. I started working on cars when I was 14, Jake said. Learned from my grandfather. Went to vocational school for certification. Been doing it ever since. 14, my mother repeated. Well, I suppose some people find their calling early. The implication was clear. Some people's callings were worth more than others. Dinner arrived. Small portions of osso buco that looked beautiful and probably tasted incredible but wouldn't fill up anyone who did physical labor for a living. Jake ate politely, said little, and endured the increasingly awkward conversation around him. Lauren could have done so much better, I heard my aunt whisper to my mother. Not quietly enough. My mother nodded. I know. I've tried talking to her. But she insists she's in love. Jake's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. After the main course, my mother stood to give a speech. She thanked everyone for coming, talked about her wonderful life, her successful family, her beautiful daughters. Vanessa has done so well, she said, beaming at my sister. Married to Christopher, a successful attorney. They just bought a house in Wellington Heights, such a prestigious neighborhood. Vanessa looked uncomfortable but accepted the praise. And Lauren, my mother continued, her smile dimming slightly. My free-spirited daughter. Always choosing the unconventional path. She paused and I felt my stomach drop. Speaking of unconventional, I suppose we should acknowledge Lauren's engagement. The room went quiet. This wasn't the plan. Mom wasn't supposed to address this publicly. Lauren is engaged to Jake Morrison, she continued, gesturing toward him. Jake is a mechanic. Works with his hands, fixes cars. Very blue collar. I felt Jake's hand tighten on mine. Now, I'm sure Jake is a very nice person, my mother said, her tone suggesting she wasn't sure of that at all. But I have to be honest, and you all know I value honesty. This engagement is somewhat embarrassing for our family. The room was completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. Embarrassing, Patricia? My father said, though he didn't sound like he disagreed. Well, yes. Richard, be realistic. The Foster family has a certain standing in this community. Your dealerships, our charitable work, our social connections. And Lauren is marrying a mechanic. Someone who works on cars for a living. He said it like Jake cleans sewers. How are we supposed to introduce him at family events? What will our friends think? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Mom. Sit down, Lauren. I'm not trying to be cruel, I'm trying to be practical. You could do so much better. You have a degree, you're attractive, you come from a good family. Why settle for someone who... Mrs. Foster, Jake said quietly, standing up. His voice wasn't loud, but something in his tone made everyone stop talking. I appreciate your honesty. I really do. So let me be honest in return. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table to my father. I don't just work on cars, sir. I own Precision Auto Industries. We manufacture automotive parts, primarily engine components and transmission systems. We have production facilities in 3 states and supply parts to major automotive manufacturers nationwide. My father picked up the card, his face going from confused to pale. Precision Auto Industries? That's the company that just acquired Foster Premium Motors, yes sir. The acquisition closed yesterday. Your dealership chain is now a subsidiary of PAI Automotive Group, which I own. Jake's voice remained calm, almost conversational. I was going to tell you at a more private moment, but since we're being honest in public, I figured now was as good a time as any. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against her plate. What? We acquired your business, ma'am. All 3 dealerships. The paperwork went through yesterday morning. I signed the final documents about 2 hours before this dinner. The silence that followed was deafening. My father was staring at the business card like it might explode. You're James Morrison. Morrison. The J. Morrison who's been in the automotive industry news for the past 5 years. That's me. Though I prefer Jake. He looked at my mother. And I do work with my hands, Mrs. Foster. I started as a mechanic, learned the business from the ground up. Started my own shop, then began manufacturing parts for my own repairs. Discovered I was good at it. Scaled up. Built a company. He shrugged. I still work on cars sometimes. I like it. Keeps me grounded. How much did you pay? My father asked, his voice hollow. For my dealerships? 22 million. Fair market value. Your accountant and lawyers reviewed everything. I assume they told you a sale was pending. They said a company called PAI Automotive Group was interested. I thought it was some corporate conglomerate. I didn't know, My father's face had gone from pale to gray. The paperwork. All those documents I signed last week. That was you. Through my corporate lawyers, yes sir. We kept it confidential per standard acquisition protocol. I wanted the deal evaluated on business merits, not complicated by the fact that I'm dating your daughter. Dating, my mother said faintly. You're engaged. You're going to marry her. And you own my husband's life's work. I own the business, ma'am. I respect the work your husband put into building it. That's why the acquisition terms were generous and the management structure stays intact. Jake's voice remained calm, but I could feel the tension in his hand. Mr. Foster keeps operational control. He knows the local market, has customer relationships I can't replicate. I'm bringing resources, infrastructure, supply chain advantages. It's a partnership, not a takeover. My father was still staring at the business card. Precision Auto Industries. I've been reading about you in trade publications for 3 years. The industry innovator, the guy who revolutionized transmission component manufacturing. You're that J. Morrison. I prefer Jake, but yes. You're 34 years old and you've built a $200 million business. $230 million last year, Jake corrected quietly. This year we're tracking toward 280. The automotive industry is evolving. Electric vehicles, hybrid systems, autonomous technology. We're positioning to be ahead of those curves. Christopher was still scrolling on his phone, his expression increasingly amazed. You supply parts to Ford, GM, Tesla, BMW. You're not just successful, you're industry-defining successful. I work hard, Jake said with a shrug. Started with one shop, one idea for improving transmission efficiency. Applied for patents, started manufacturing my own designs. Turned out other companies wanted those parts. Scaled from there. While still working as a mechanic, I added, squeezing his hand. He still takes appointments at the original shop on Saturdays. Keeps his skills sharp, stays connected to the work. Why? My mother asked, genuinely confused. If you're worth hundreds of millions, why work on cars? Because I love it, Jake said simply. And because the moment I stop understanding the hands-on work, I stop understanding my customers. Every engineer in my company spends time in the shop. You can't design better parts if you don't know how they actually get installed, how they perform under real conditions. My cousin Brandon had been silent, processing the implications. Mr. Morrison, Jake, I work at the main dealership. Service department. Am I going to lose my job? Why would you lose your job? Jake asked, looking confused. Because I'm family. There might be concerns about favoritism or... Brandon, I'm marrying into this family. If I fired everyone related to the Fosters, I'd have to fire my own future wife. Jake smiled slightly. Your job performance determines your employment, not your last name. If you're good at what you do, you have nothing to worry about. I'm good at what I do, Brandon said quickly. Then we're fine. Though I might ask you to test some of our new diagnostic systems. We're developing software that could revolutionize how service departments operate. I'd value feedback from someone with practical experience. Brandon looked stunned. You want my feedback? You work the floor. You see problems I don't see from a corporate office. Of course I want your feedback. My father set down Jake's business card with a hand that trembled slightly. You've been planning this acquisition for months. All while dating my daughter. Didn't it occur to you that this might be complicated? Of course it occurred to me, sir. That's why I was upfront with Lauren from the beginning. Told her I was looking at dealerships, that I was evaluating various chains including yours. Jake glanced at me. She told me to do what made sense for my business. Said she'd handle the family complications when they arose. I told him to buy your dealerships if the numbers made sense, I confirmed. Because they're good businesses and because keeping business and family separate was important. The acquisition had nothing to do with our relationship. Except it does, my mother protested. Everything is connected now. Jake owns Richard's business. He's your father's employer. That changes everything. It changes the business relationship, I said. It doesn't change the fact that I love him. That we're building a life together. That we're getting married. But people will talk, she said desperately. They'll say he bought the business to control us, or that you're marrying him for his money, or... Let them talk, I interrupted. People who know us won't believe gossip. People who don't know us? Their opinions don't matter. Vanessa had been quiet through most of this, but she finally spoke up. Mom, you're missing the point. You stood up at your birthday dinner and called Jake embarrassing. You told 50 people that Lauren's engagement was shameful because her fiancé works with his hands. She gestured at Jake. And he's a multimillionaire CEO who just bought Dad's business. You couldn't have been more wrong. I know I was wrong, my mother said, tears streaming faster now. I know, Vanessa. I'm mortified. I'm ashamed. I want to disappear. Then apologize, Vanessa said bluntly. Stop crying about how embarrassed you are and apologize to the man you publicly insulted. My mother looked at Jake, mascara running down her face. I'm so sorry. Jake, I'm profoundly sorry. I judged you without knowing you. I made assumptions based on your work, and those assumptions were not only wrong but cruel. I appreciate that, Mrs. Foster, Jake said. For what it's worth, I understand where you were coming from. You saw a mechanic and thought blue-collar, limited income, limited prospects. It's a common assumption. That doesn't make it right, my father said. Patricia, we raised our daughters to value character over credentials. Tonight we showed we don't actually believe that. We showed we're hypocrites. Speak for yourself, Vanessa muttered. I was nice to Jake. You were polite, I corrected. There's a difference. You weren't cruel like Mom, but you weren't welcoming either. You kept asking patronizing questions about Jake's shop, about trade school, about whether he planned to expand his business. All with this tone like you were talking to a child about his lemonade stand. Vanessa flushed. I was trying to be interested in his work. You were trying to find polite ways to determine if he was good enough for your sister, I said. And you'd already decided he wasn't. The table fell silent. The birthday cake sat untouched, 60 candles burning down slowly. Finally, my father spoke. Jake, I need to meet with you. Not just about the business transition but to apologize properly. Man to man, father to future son-in-law. You deserve that. I appreciate that, sir. I'm free tomorrow morning if you are. Tomorrow morning. 8:30. My office at the main dealership. Which is now my office, Jake said with a slight smile. But yes, I'll be there. My mother had stopped crying and was staring at the cake like she couldn't remember why it was there. We should cut this, she said absently. People are waiting for cake. Mom, I said gently. I think the party's over. And it was. Guests began making excuses to leave. Early mornings, babysitters, vague obligations. Within 30 minutes, the private dining room had emptied except for immediate family. My parents, Vanessa and Christopher, Brandon, and us. So what happens now? My mother asked quietly. With all of us. With the family. That depends, I said. Can you accept Jake for who he is? Not what he's worth, but who he is as a person. He's a good man, my father said slowly. I can see that. Handled tonight with more grace than I would have. Didn't rub our faces in our mistakes even though he could have. He's humble, Brandon added. Owns a massive company but still takes Saturday shifts as a mechanic. That's actually really cool. He's successful on a scale I can barely comprehend, Christopher said, still looking at his phone. But he let us all treat him like he was beneath us without saying a word. That takes either tremendous patience or tremendous confidence. Both, I said, smiling at Jake. He's secure in who he is. Doesn't need external validation. Jake shrugged. I know what I've built. I know what I'm worth, both financially and as a person. Other people's opinions don't change those facts. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling. Will you forgive me? Both of you. Eventually, I said. But Mom, you don't get to just apologize and have everything go back to normal. You humiliated us publicly. That has consequences. What consequences? We're still getting married, I said firmly. But you need to understand that Jake and I are a team. If you can't respect him, you can't be part of our lives. I'll respect him, she promised immediately. I'll do better. I'll make this right. Actions, Mom. Not words. Show us through how you treat him going forward. The conversation continued for another hour. Awkward, painful, but necessary. Apologies were offered, explanations attempted, boundaries established. By the time Jake and I left, I was exhausted. But also oddly relieved. The truth was out. No more pretending, no more watching my family condescend to the man I loved. That went well, Jake said dryly as we got in his truck. You have a strange definition of well. Your family now knows who I am. Your mom apologized. Your dad wants to make things right. That's progress. My mom called you embarrassing in front of 50 people first. True, he acknowledged. But the look on her face when she realized I bought your dad's business? Priceless. Almost worth the insults. I laughed despite everything. You're terrible. I'm practical. And I'm not going to pretend that watching people's faces change when they realize I'm successful wasn't satisfying. Revenge is beneath you. It's not revenge, he protested. It's education. Your family needed to learn that judging people by their work is short-sighted. Tonight taught that lesson very effectively. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the Miami night warm through the open windows. Jake drove his old truck because he liked it, because it was comfortable, because status symbols didn't interest him. Do you think they'll come to the wedding? Asked finally. Your mom will come, Jake predicted. She'll spend the next 6 months trying to make up for tonight. Your dad will come because he respects that I'm giving him a fair deal on the business. Vanessa and Christopher will come because they're curious about the world we're part of now. So cynical. So realistic, he corrected. But Lauren, I don't actually care if they come. I'm marrying you, not your family. Everything else is just noise. Vanessa was staring at me. You knew. This whole time, you knew what he was worth and you let Mom. I knew who Jake was, I interrupted. But more importantly, I knew who he is. The money doesn't matter to me. It never has. I fell in love with a guy who fixed my alternator and took me to a diner for our first date. The fact that he also happens to own a company worth hundreds of millions? That's just context. Context, my mother repeated, her voice shrill. Lauren, he owns your father's business. He's your father's boss now. That's not context, that's a power dynamic. Actually, my father said slowly, still staring at Jake's business card, I'm his employee now. Technically, the acquisition terms included management retention. I stay on as operator of the dealerships, but I report to PAI Corporate. You report to him, my mother said, pointing at Jake. Your daughter's fiancé is your boss. It would appear so. Jake cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Mr. Foster, I have a lot of respect for how you've run the dealerships. That's why we kept the existing management structure. You're good at what you do. I just want to integrate your operations into our larger network, improve supply chain efficiency, maybe modernize some of your systems. You're going to change how I run my business, my father said. I'm going to help you run it better, Jake corrected gently. We have resources you don't, bulk purchasing power, marketing reach, technical support. Your dealerships will benefit from being part of a larger group. My cousin Brandon had gone very quiet. He worked for my father, which meant he now worked for Jake too. The birthday cake arrived, but no one was paying attention to it. The server set it down in front of my mother, who looked at it like she'd forgotten why we were all there. I think, my father said slowly, that we need to talk. Privately. Jake, would you be willing to meet with me tomorrow? To discuss the transition? Of course, sir. I have a meeting at the main dealership at 10 a.m. I was planning to introduce myself to the staff. We could talk before that, say 8:30. 8:30, my father agreed numbly. My mother had tears streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. I called him embarrassing. I called my daughter's fiancé embarrassing in front of 50 people, and he owns my husband's company. You didn't know, Jake said not unkindly. You saw a mechanic and made assumptions. It's understandable. It's not understandable, I said sharply. Even if Jake worked at a shop making $50,000 a year, you had no right to humiliate him. To humiliate us. The problem isn't that you didn't know he was wealthy. The problem is that you thought his work made him less valuable as a person. Lauren's right, my father said quietly. Patricia, what you said tonight, that wasn't okay. Regardless of what Jake does for a living. My mother buried her face in her hands, sobbing. My Aunt Margaret and several other relatives rushed to comfort her, though I noticed they kept glancing at Jake with new interest, calculating expressions replacing their earlier disdain. Vanessa leaned across the table. Lauren, I'm sorry. For how we all treated him tonight. We were wrong. Yes, I agreed. You were. But why didn't you tell us? Why let it get this far? Because I wanted to see how you'd treat him without knowing, I said simply. I wanted to see if my family could respect someone based on their character instead of their bank account. You failed that test. The party broke up shortly after. People left in awkward clusters, whispering to each other, no doubt already spreading the story. The Foster family drama would be all over their social circles by morning. Jake and I were the last to leave. As we walked to his car, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that he drove despite being able to afford anything he wanted, he squeezed my hand. You okay? He asked. I should be asking you that. They were horrible to you. I've dealt with worse, he said with a shrug. Though I'll admit your mom's speech was pretty brutal. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for them, he interrupted. You're not responsible for their behavior. He opened the truck door for me. Though I have to ask, did you enjoy watching that play out? Even a little? I thought about it. Maybe a little. Is that terrible? No. They earned it. He closed my door and walked around to the driver's side. Though I probably should have found a less dramatic way to tell your dad about the acquisition. You think? I laughed despite everything. You literally bought his business and didn't tell him until your future mother-in-law called you embarrassing. In my defense, I was planning to tell him tomorrow. Your mom just forced my hand. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Jake asked, do you think they'll come to the wedding? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me doesn't care. Part of me really wants them to see me marry you and realize that you're the best thing that ever happened to me. We could elope, he suggested. Just as a courthouse done. We could, I agreed. But I kinda want the big wedding now. I want to invite everyone who looked at you like you were beneath them tonight and show them exactly who you are." Jake smiled. "Revenge wedding. I like it. Not revenge. Justice. Pay justice wedding. Even better." The next morning I got a call from my father at 7 a.m. "Lauren, your mother and I need to talk to you. Can you come by the house?" "Is this about Jake?" "Among other things. Please. We need to apologize properly." I drove to my parents' house, a large colonial in an exclusive neighborhood that suddenly felt less impressive knowing Jake could probably buy it without touching his savings. Both my parents looked like they hadn't slept. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. My father looked exhausted. "We're sorry," my mother said immediately as I walked in. "Lauren, I'm so deeply sorry for what I said last night. About Jake, about the engagement, all of it. You should be apologizing to Jake, not me." "We will. Your father has a meeting with him in an hour. But I need you to know, I didn't mean to hurt you. Or him. She struggled for words. "I wanted you to marry someone who could provide for you. Someone established." I saw a mechanic and thought. "You thought he wasn't good enough," I finished. "Because of his job. Because working with your hands isn't as valuable as working in an office or owning a business." "I was wrong," she said simply. "Obviously wrong about Jake specifically, but also wrong about the principle. Your father and I have been talking all night. About our values, about what we've taught you girls, about the example we've set." My father nodded. "I built my business from scratch, Lauren. Started as a salesman on someone else's lot. Worked my way up, saved money, took risks. Somewhere along the way I forgot that journey. Started thinking success meant status instead of hard work. Jake's journey is like mine was," he continued. "Started with nothing, built something remarkable. The difference is he did it bigger and faster than I ever managed. And he did it while staying humble enough to still get his hands dirty. He works on cars because he loves it," I said. "Not because he has to. He says it keeps him connected to why he started the company in the first place." "That's admirable," my father said. "That's the kind of person you should marry. Someone who understands the value of work regardless of wealth." My mother reached for my hand. "I'm ashamed of what I said. Ashamed that I cared more about what my friends would think than about your happiness. Can you forgive me?" I thought about it. "Eventually. But Mom, you humiliated both of us in public. You can't just apologize and have everything go back to normal." "I know. I'll do better. I'll make this right. Start by treating Jake with respect. Not because he's wealthy, but because he's the man I love. Because he's kind and honest and good." "We will," my father promised. "I'm meeting with him in an hour about the business transition. But before we talk business, I'm going to apologize. As a man and as your father." The meeting between Jake and my father apparently went well. Jake called me afterward, sounding amused. "Your dad apologized for about 20 minutes straight. Then we talked business for another hour. He's good at what he does, Lauren. I can see why the dealerships have been successful." "He's relieved you're not going to fire him." "Why would I fire him? He's an asset." Jake paused. "Though I did make it clear that if anyone at the dealerships treats you poorly because of our relationship, they'll answer to me." "Hi, hero," I said with a smile. "I'm serious. You're going to be my wife. That means my employees, including your father, need to treat you with respect. Our wedding is going to be awkward." "Maybe," Jake agreed. "Or maybe it'll be fine. Your parents seem genuinely sorry." Over the next few weeks things slowly improved. My mother called Jake and apologized directly. A conversation he said was uncomfortable but sincere. My father worked with Jake on the dealership transition and came away impressed with Jake's business acumen and respectful management style. Vanessa invited us to dinner and apologized for her family's behavior. Christopher kept asking Jake for business advice, which Jake patiently provided. The rest of the family gradually adjusted to the new reality. The whispers stopped. The pitying looks disappeared. Suddenly people were very interested in talking to me at family events, asking about wedding plans, commenting on my engagement ring. The ring that Jake had picked out himself, using knowledge he'd gained from years of working with precision tools. Nothing pretentious, nothing flashy, just a perfect diamond set in an elegant band that fit my hand like it was made for me. As it was. Jake had spent months designing it, working with a jeweler to get every detail right. That was who he was, Thoughtful, deliberate, caring about the details that mattered. 3 months after my mother's disastrous birthday dinner, we got married. The wedding was exactly what we wanted. Elegant but not ostentatious. Expensive but not wasteful, celebrating love rather than status. My parents came. My mother cried through the entire ceremony, though whether from happiness or residual shame I wasn't sure. Probably both. My father walked me down the aisle, and when he gave me to Jake he whispered, "Take care of her. You're a good man." Jake whispered back, "I will." "And thank you, sir." At the reception my mother gave a toast. When Lauren first told me she was engaged to a mechanic, I was horrified. I thought she was throwing away her future. She paused, her voice breaking. I was wrong. She wasn't throwing away anything. She was choosing a man of integrity, intelligence, and ambition. A man who built something remarkable from nothing. A man who loves my daughter more than I ever imagined someone could love her. She raised her glass. "Jake, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry I couldn't see what Lauren saw from the beginning. Welcome to our family. We're lucky to have you." The room applauded. Jake squeezed my hand. Later, as we danced our first dance as husband and wife, he leaned down and whispered, "Your mom called me a mechanic like it was an insult. But you know what? I am a mechanic. That's where I started, and I'm proud of it." "I'm proud of you too," I said. "All of you. The mechanic, the CEO, the man who still changes his own oil because he likes it. The man who loves you more than anything," he added. "Especially that part." As we danced, I looked around at our guest. My family, who'd learned a hard lesson about judging people. Jake's family, who'd never cared about money and welcomed me warmly from the beginning. Friends who knew us, loved us, supported us. This was what mattered. Not the size of Jake's company or the value of his assets. Not my family's social status or my mother's approval. Just us. Two people who found each other because of a broken alternator and built something beautiful together. My mother had called him embarrassing. She'd thought his work made him less valuable. She couldn't have been more wrong. Jake Morrison wasn't embarrassing. He was extraordinary. And he was mine.